Good afternoon. My name is Ms. Sakowitz. I'm a teacher at Miami Beach Senior High. I'm currently teaching dual enrollment classes to get high school students, mostly seniors, ready for college. But I've been teaching one area of life skills or another for the last 16 years. So I'm excited today to talk about the job hunt. And this is part of a 6th session program from Junior Achievement. So let's go ahead and let's start with the presentation here. Okay. So today we're on a session called On the Hunt. And our previous sessions were My Brand, which we talked about the importance of having a good reputation. And that good reputation, which is kind of like your brand, just like Nike, or if you were Beyonce, you have to have that good reputation where people know you for performing well or doing good in the community. In class, you would be well behaved and you would work hard for your grades. That's part of your brand. And those are the kind of experiences that'll help you get internships in the future, jobs, recommendations for colleges. So you're already starting now. Even if you're in middle school, if you're in elementary, you're starting by creating your own brand now. Then we talked about 16 career paths and clusters. And while there are thousands of different jobs available, most jobs can fit into one of those 16. And if you're interested in learning more, see that video. Next, we talked about high growth careers. So it's important to know what careers are available. And with the career paths and clusters, we took an inventory to see what our interests were. But for high growth careers, it's also important to know what jobs are going to be hiring in the next 10 years. Because even if you have your dream job, if they're not hiring anyone in your area, you wouldn't be able to get a position. So that presentation allowed you to find out more about the positions that would be hired in the next 10 years and geographically where they would be. Then last session, we talked about career mapping. So it was about creating a plan starting now in middle school, working your way through high school, maybe college, maybe a job right after high school, but getting ready for your dream career. And today we're talking about hunting for your job. So the picture showed a journey, and this is all about a journey starting elementary and middle school and beyond. Now, I do want to say, and I want to point out a couple of the worksheets that we're going to be doing today. So the first one is a sheet called On the Hunt, and we're going to start filling that in as soon as we finish our first activity. And it's actually a really fun game called Two Truths and a Myth. After that, we have an amazing resource which would be 25 job hunting tips. Then you have what I'm really excited to talk about. It's like a skeletal resume format. So it's to help us put together the information that you would need to create a resume. And then finally, you have a sample resume. And this will show you what a resume should look like. And this should be for someone about your age. So it gives you, or a little bit older, and it gives you an idea of what kind of experience to put on your resume when you're just starting out. So again, in this session, you're going to learn how to best present yourself when you're looking for a job. In the final session, which is next session, you're going to learn about the skills to help you excel in that job. They're called soft skills, and that's going to make you invaluable in your job and keep your job and also grow in your position. Having a strong resume, which we'll talk about today, and interviewing skills are going to help you get the job you want. But you want to stay tuned for next week, which is keeping that job. So let's talk about this first activity in this game called Two Truths and a Myth. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it, but if any of you have ever applied for a job, you know, sometimes when you apply for a job, sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. So today we're going to talk about realities involved in that job application process and myths, things that we think are going to happen but don't really happen. So each topic that we're going to cover is going to contain 4 rounds. And each round you're going to see 3 statements. 2 of them are going to be true statements. 1 of them is going to be false. Maybe you've played this game in class before. So the goal is to correctly identify the myth and earn points. And if you are the first person, you want to raise your hand and guess. So let's go ahead and begin. All right, so round one is looking for a job. All right, so we have these three statements. Let's find out which one is the myth. Pound the pavement, walk around town and stop into local stores to ask whether they are hiring. Will that help you? Another idea, think about your future career goals. Is it possible to get a job now that will provide experience for your career destination? If you were paying attention last week, you hopefully know the answer to that. And then finally, most people stumble upon jobs when they least expect them and aren't really looking for them. So we have three statements, two of them are true. Which one do we think is false? Is it 1, 2, or 3? I think the last one has a lot to do with luck. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go with that one. And that is a myth. Most people do not just stumble into jobs. Most of the time we have to work really hard to get a job. All right, let's go to the next round, or the next same topic. All right, so we have our three statements. First statement, consider a seasonal job to get your foot in the door. Many companies need extra help during the summer or holiday season. Okay, so does someone want to apply during December as a way to get started with, say, Bath and Body Works for another store in the mall? Maybe that's a good way to get started. Do we think that's a truth or a myth? Next one, searching for a job is an independent process. Turning down offers of help shows that you were independent and resourceful. So do you want to turn down offers where people are helping to show how independent you are? And then finally, look for jobs in places where you spend your free time. Think about where you like to shop, eat, or hang out. So do we think that's a good idea? Going places we're comfortable with, we're familiar with, maybe we even have a good relationship with the people that work there. So let's think about this. 1 sounds like a good idea because they are going to be hiring during heavy seasons. 2, you're turning down help. That doesn't really sound like a good idea, but let's look at 3. Looking for jobs in places that we know. That sounds like a good idea. So I think we're going to all go with option 2. That is the myth. Very good. Next one. All right, so true or false? Myth or truth? Network with family and friends to let them know that you're looking for a job and the kind of job you're seeking. That sounds like a good idea. 2, do not bother with unpaid volunteer work because it will not advance your career. Well, I'm a high school teacher, and I will tell you, most of my high school students have a very hard time getting their first job because they said that most jobs want to see experience on their resume, and they won't give them a job without experience on their resume. And my students typically complain and say they can't put experience on their resume when no one will give them the experience. So this is what I tell students. See if they can put their volunteer work on their resume. Internship is a great way to get unpaid volunteer work, but also doing community service, which is required for graduation. So the students are required to do it anyway, and they have it. And that usually does help. So that doesn't seem like a good idea. And then the third one says, research the company before the interview. Learn everything you can about what the company does and what makes them successful. This is great because it'll show the people that are interviewing you how interested you are in the company. And on rare occasions, you might learn that this isn't the right company for you. So that sounds good. The only one that doesn't sound good is number 2. Excellent. So I hope this is one of the main things you all get before you leave this session, which is unpaid volunteer work, internships, community service, etc., are all excellent ways teens and young adults can build their resume. You get great experience. Last week we talked about experience called transferable skills. That's what you're going to get here. You're going to learn skills when you're working with other people and when you're volunteering or working in the internships. And these are things you can put on your resume, but these are also skills you can apply to other jobs. All right, now we're going to go to round 2, which is all about interviewing. All right, so is the first one, prepare questions to ask at the interview. Make sure you have questions about the job or the company. That does sound like a good way to prepare for an interview. Okay, let's see, that sounds like a truth. Let's go to the next one. Research the company before the interview. Learn everything you can about what the company does and why it's successful. That sounds like a truth that we had in the last round, and that sounds really good because it's important to know about the company. Sometimes employers will ask you about their company and they want to know if you've done your background research. All right, so far that sounds good. Let's go to the third one. It's okay to be a few minutes late to the interview, but do not be later than 10 minutes. That actually doesn't sound good. I hope that doesn't sound good to anyone that's paying attention. So number 3 is likely the myth. And not only is it a bad idea to be a few minutes late because it's showing that you're irresponsible, you actually want to be early. And you want to plan to be early and be actually pretty early. I'd say no later than 15 minutes early. You want to plan ahead because sometimes maybe there'll be traffic, there'll be maybe when you're on the way there, you'll get the train. Maybe it's going to be a crowded elevator and you can't get to the floor right away. I mean, you have to plan to be quite a few minutes early just to make sure you're on time. So we're going to guess that number 3 is the myth there. All right. Let's go to the next round for interviewing. Okay, the first one says, truth or myth. The sole purpose of an interview is for an employer to gauge whether you're a good fit for a job. Okay, that's why they want to interview you. That sounds good. We are going to get to the definition of these things later. All right, next, 2, maintain good eye contact with your interviewer. This shows that you're confident and actively. That also sounds like a good idea. All right, number 3, dress professionally. You don't need to wear a suit, but you should wear a conservative outfit that is clean and wrinkle-free. That sounds like a good idea as well. So these all kind of sound like truths, but one of them maybe doesn't sound as much as strong as the other 2. So let's go ahead and let's see if it's number 1, because we can't deny the importance of good eye contact and we can't deny the importance of dressing professionally. That is the myth. I do want to go back to this one real quick. Didn't change. I know a lot of times we think that we must wear a suit for every job interview, and that's not always the case. For instance, if you're in high school and you're applying for a job, and maybe the job is in a fast food restaurant, you don't have to apply and you don't have to go to the interview in a suit. A suit always looks great, but the rule of thumb is usually to dress a level or 2 above what you would be wearing on a normal workday at that restaurant or establishment. And typically in a place like a fast food restaurant or in a retail store, you might have a uniform that you're wearing. So in that case, you want to wear something clean, conservative, and professional. It does not necessarily have to be a suit. So I hope that relieves some of your anxiety if you don't yet have a suit. All right, let's go to the final one. All right, so this is still interviewing. So truth or myth. You should be enthusiastic, have a positive attitude, and smile. Show the employer that you want the job. That sounds great. The more interested you are and the more interested you show, the more interested the employer will be in getting to know you and seeing if you're a good fit. All right, next, don't be late. Plan to arrive 10 minutes early to the interview. So that sounds good. I was recommending 15. Next, express your individuality at an interview. For example, speaking in slang or wearing revealing clothing and multiple piercings shows an employer that you have your own style. All right, so we've got 3 statements. We want to pick the one that's the myth again. First option over here sounded great. Second option over here sounded great. And third option over here does not sound great for an interview. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick this and we're going to talk about this. Okay, so you do want to, it is okay, and I definitely support people expressing their personal style. And you may express your personal style outside the workplace. However, when you're going to an interview, you want to dress conservatively and speak clearly during the interview. You always want to put your best foot first. This is not about hiding who the true you is. This is about putting your best foot first and showing what you have to offer. These are, I can't even say they're unspoken interview rules, There's spoken interview rules, and they're great tips for doing well. So when you're not at work, you have freedom to express yourself and dress individually, and express your style. But during an interview, you definitely have to be conservative and you definitely have to be professional. That said, as you get older and further into your career, you'll see that different professions have different rules for what to wear during the interview, just like I said, to dress a step above. And certain careers require you to dress more conservatively than other careers. When I was in college, the example was always banking. Whenever you're going into any kind of banking profession, you have to know it's a conservative profession whenever you're dealing with money. Therefore, you should be dressed in that suit and you should look conservative. But then when you're applying to a position in the arts, there is a little bit more room there. You still say professional, absolutely, but it's not as conservative. All right, so now we're going to get to round 3, which is applying for your job. So again, we want to see which one is the myth. Let's identify the 2 truths. So number 1, check to make sure your interest and skill set matches the requirements of the job. That's great. The reason this is so great is because it might save you some time and it might save the employer some time. If your interests and your skills don't match the job you're applying for, 2 things might happen. 1, you're not going to get the job because the employer is going to see that. Or 2, you don't see that, you get the job and you're not going to be very happy there. So that kind of makes sense as a truth, number 1. Number 2, be available to work. The more availability you have in your schedule, the better chance you'll get the job. Okay, so that sounds good too. Sometimes when a company is applying, there's lots of availability, and then sometimes they really need certain skills or certain time frames filled. So if you really need that job, you really want to open up your time frame and try and match their needs. All right, let's go to number 3. It's okay to leave areas of an application blank, especially when you do not have the experience needed to complete that. Well, first, you never want to lie on any application. But second, you don't want to leave areas blank. So if you don't have work experience, as I've told my students before, write about your volunteer experience, your community experience. Write about some experience you have. Most of the experience we get from extracurricular activities in school, some of the things that maybe our parents have signed up for outside of school, extracurricular activities, leadership camps, these offer transferable skills that you can start putting on an application or a resume. You haven't had a job. You're not going to lie and make up a job you haven't had, but you are going to write about the skills you've developed and the experiences you've had. So we are going to click 3, and that is the myth. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so now we're still in applying. All right, first one, you should apply to as many jobs as you can, even if you're not qualified. You never know what type of job you'll get. Well, this sounds like one of the myths that we had in the previous round. So we'll get back to that, but we'll get back to that. Let's see what the other ones are. Number 2, be honest about your experience and your skills. You don't want to promise something that you won't be able to deliver. And that's true. You always have to be honest. For instance, if you were applying for a job to be a tutor, and the parent that was hiring you to be a tutor said that one of the classes the child needs help in is French, and you don't know anything about French, and you lie and say you're proficient in French, you're not going to be able to do a very good job there. And they'll soon realize that quickly, and you'll probably lose your job. So honesty is important, and it's also going to help you match your skills with the perfect job for you. All right, so 2 sounds good. 3, proofread your application. Make sure it's legible and error-free. I will speak from experience with this one. You absolutely have to. I probably am not the best at typing, so if I don't proofread my emails will be sprinkled in all kinds of typos. And whenever you're sending any kind of professional application or resume or communication, you want to make sure the communication is professional and is clear and shows that you have good communication skills. So if you were to submit a resume that was full of spelling errors, that was messy, your application might be tossed aside and not even looked at any further, and you would never even be considered for the application or for the position. And I know that might sound like it's not fair, but that's reality. Very often when people are applying for jobs, there are probably multiple people applying for one position, either a paid job or an unpaid internship. And they can only hire one, and they're going to look through several applications and resumes to make sure yours is perfect and it sticks out. Okay, so number 2 and number 3 sound really good, and they sound like they're definitely truths. Let's go ahead and let's go back to number 1. Apply to as many jobs as you can. Even if you're not qualified, you never know what type of job you'll get. So we covered that in another round where this might be a waste of your time and it might be a waste of the employer's time. It is. If you're applying for jobs that you're not qualified for, you're not going to be hired. They need people with a certain skill set. And it's okay if you don't have that skill set yet. Hopefully, you're going to work on getting that skill set so that you can apply for the next position that has it. Or you're going to apply for a position that's a better match and a better fit for you. That said, if it's really hard and you're having a hard time applying for a job, first of all, I'll stop here and I'll say this is definitely the myth. There's no question. But if you are having a hard time getting a job, it is okay to apply for multiple positions. Like I said, there might be, companies might only be hiring one person, and there might be dozens of people applying for that one position. So it might benefit you to look outside, just the places that you visited and start applying and looking online for different positions. And yes, that does mean applying for multiple positions, but they should be positions you're qualified for. All right, let's go to the next round. All right, so we're still applying for a job. So number 1, if applying for a job in person, take the application home and return it the next day. That will give you extra time to polish your responses and your spelling. Does that sound good? That sounds good to me. That makes a lot of sense in most cases. So far that sounds like a truth. 2, complete the entire application. A completed application shows that you are thorough and can follow directions. This is absolutely important. An employer wants to hire someone that knows how to follow directions, and it can show that you have developed literacy skills where you can read and answer and provide the responses required. So 2 is no question. And number 3, only apply to companies that are currently advertising open positions. It's a waste of everyone's time to apply to companies that don't have open positions. Well, it would be a waste of time to apply to a place that's not hiring. But that's not what this question's saying. It's saying that they don't have an open position. Sometimes they don't advertise the position, and they actually have a need for a certain position or a certain person to fill a certain job requirement. So it doesn't hurt to let the employer and the company know you're interested. Going back to number 1 is an excellent point, unless you go and you apply to a company where they say they need the application immediately. And I've actually heard of students telling me that has happened to them before in the past, where they go and the company is in dire need of hiring someone and they want the application immediately. And by the way, many companies now will have an online application. You can complete it from your own home. Most companies are actually reducing the amount of paperwork. So number 1 makes sense unless the company suggests that they need it right away, immediately. So number 1 makes sense, but there are certain factors where it wouldn't apply. 2, absolutely show that you know how to read directions. And 3, yes, you would be wasting time if they're not hiring, but that is different from not posting a position. Let's go ahead and click on 3. That is the myth. So apply to companies that interest you, whether or not they have open positions. A company's needs are constantly changing, and taking the initiative can be impressive. All right, next one, and the next round is listing references. All right, so one, adults who know you well, such as coaches, teachers, counselors, group leaders, or principals make great references. Well, we're not even going to hesitate there. You definitely want someone that's going to write a reference that knows you well. Okay. And remember when I talked about building your brand in a previous session, that's why it's really important to show your best wherever you are and at all times. And this is how you're going to build relationships with others that will write letters of recommendation for you. Great. So that's definitely a check. That's great. 2, if you've done odd jobs around your neighborhoods, babysitting, snow shoveling, dog walking, or leaf raking, ask those neighbors to be your references. Okay. This shows that you've had some responsibility and you've fulfilled your responsibilities. So great. As you get older, you're going to probably have a more stable reference than just odd jobs. And the goal is to move you to that. All right, so this is great. It's a great idea for a beginner. Number 2, mom and dad are your strongest references. They know you best. They will be your strongest reference, and your mom and dad definitely do know you best. And those are true statements. They just do not apply for they do not apply to what we're talking about, the context of this situation. And the context of this situation is a job application. And usually you don't want a family member writing your reference for a job application. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick that one. Parents are not good references. They are not usually very objective when it comes to their own children. So they do know you well, and they will have the greatest things to say about you, but they're not objective. And it's usually not appropriate to use a family member. Okay. Next, listing references. Number 1, if you volunteer regularly at an organization, ask your supervisor to be a reference. Well, this makes sense. This is even better than having a reference for an odd job. So that sounds good there. All right, number 2, if the interview goes well, follow up by sending a page of references. Okay, this is great, but typically you're going to send the references ahead of time. A lot of times employers might check your references before they even meet with you for an interview. Also, there's something called a follow-up letter or a thank you letter. And this is typically what you would send after an interview. It's actually common practice now to send it via email. And that's typically what's sent as opposed to references after the interview. All right, next one. Ask references for permission before you list them on your reference page. This is an excellent practice. So this is going to get an immediate check. 1, it's polite because very often when you're applying, the employer will call the references. And these people that are referring you have the right to know that they're going to be contacted, and they have the right to decline if they don't want to be contacted. Also, in the rare occasion where they might not have the most positive things to say, by asking for permission, you would quickly learn that they wouldn't serve as a good reference. Let's go ahead. We know 1 is great and 3 is great. Let's go ahead and select number 2. It's better to provide references during the interview. This keeps your application, interview notes, and references all in one place. Typically, the references are actually included on the actual job application or on the resume. When you're creating a resume, you have the option of saying references available upon request, and most employers will request those references. All right, last round for listing references. All right, first one, true or false, truth or myth. Personal references are just as strong as professional references. Personal references are going to always be positive, and there are times and places for personal references. When you're writing, when you're applying for a scholarship or for a college application, they very often will ask for a personal reference. Not always, but very often. So those are typically helpful. When you're applying for a job, typically jobs will ask for professional references. However, sometimes you'll see where they're asking for not just a former supervisor or former teacher, maybe someone that knows you in the community. and then that person would provide a little bit more of a personal description. All right, so likely this is not a truth we're looking for. Let's move to the next one. List 3 references on a separate sheet of paper. Be ready to give your reference list to an employer during an interview. You absolutely should always have your references available to the employer at the interview if you haven't provided it already. Remember, it's very often going to go on a job application, which they'll have before the interview, or on the resume, which they'll have before the interview. In the event that you have available upon request, they might email you and ask for that immediately. All right, so 2, yes. 3, let your references know when you're applying for a job, then they will be prepared when contacted by potential employers. So 3 absolutely makes sense. That was covered in the last round. So this means here that likely we're going to go with number 1 as the myth. And so it is a myth because when applying for a job, professional references hold more weight than personal references. Professional references can speak to your ability to be successful in a job. Again, I don't want to discredit personal references because they're there for a reason, and they are totally appropriate in the right time in the right place. So if you have great personal references, hold on to them. They might be very useful for a scholarship, award, or college application. All right, so we finished that activity. I enjoyed that, and I hope you all did as well. All right, so now that we finished the activity, I'd like to know what we think is the most important fact we learned in that game. And if you're following along at home, you want to go to your on-the-job worksheet, and under warm-up it says, how much do you know? What's the most important fact you learned in that game? So any answer is good there. I know I have a few biases, and I'd like you to all write, be no later than 15 minutes early to a job interview. That is very, very important. If you have a job interview, I want you to make sure you arrive on time and plan ahead in case something happens along the way to slow you down. Because if you are late to an interview, you are probably not getting that job. So that's something that I think is a really important part of that game. But there are several others. Being open, putting your best foot forward, doing your research about a company. Imagine going to an interview, showing up, and you're all prepared, and you think you know what they're going to ask, and they start asking questions about their company, and you haven't done your homework, and you haven't done your research, and you don't know what to say. So that's important also. All right, and then before we move on, were there any myths that you thought were true? Were there any myths that were confusing? I know there were a few for me where, sometimes they could be considered myth and sometimes they were totally true. So I don't know if any of those confused you. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is go over this sheet here. It's called 25 job hunting tips. All right, so it's divided into 4 categories, and I'm going to go through them quickly because these are the best ways to help you get a job. So I'm going to see, let's see here, we're going to stop here, and we are going to open this up over here, and we're going to go to this one. Okay, and now we're going to go back. And I am going to share the screen with you. So if you're following along at home, you'll be able to see these 25 tips. Okay, so they're divided into 4 categories. You've got networking, applying, providing references, and interviewing. So it is my recommendation you create a file folder that says job preparation or careers. And you keep this and you hold on to it as you're getting ready to apply for your first job or internship. All right, so we've got 6 tips for networking. So let's find out if you know what networking is. Networking is kind of like a fun way of saying meeting others and talking to others. But when you network, it's with purpose. It's there to make connections to help you in your future, in your dream job. So, networking tips. Number one, friends and family might know of job opportunities or connections. Ask them. The more you communicate, even with people you know, and you let them know you're looking for a job, there's more people out there that are going to know you're looking for a job, that have the opportunity to help match you with an availability or an opening that they might have heard from someone else. Two, visit local businesses and ask the managers about open positions. It's okay if there's not a now hiring sign on the window. It's okay if they don't have that. They might be hiring. I teach at Miami Beach Senior High. I love walking around and shopping on Lincoln Road. Most of those places are hiring often. My students always go there looking for jobs, and I very rarely see now hiring signs in the windows. So many of those students are getting these positions by going in, asking the manager. All right, three, apply for jobs that are convenient. Long commutes increase stress and increase the possibility of lateness. So I am definitely very much in favor of going with positions that are close and easily accessible. All right, four, look for a job that works for your schedule. I know when we were covering the two truths and one myth, one of the examples was to be open and be flexible with your schedule. And that is true. You don't want to shut a job down because, you know, they are only hiring at 4 p.m. and 4 p.m. is the time that you go to the gym. What I'm saying is, okay, if they're hiring at 4 p.m. and you really want this job, take the job and reschedule your gym time for another time. But if they are hiring, and I'm going to speak as a teacher because this is true, if they're hiring for a job during school hours, of course you can't apply for that job. It's during school hours. You can't work during school unless you're part of the OJT program. So that's absolutely a no-no. So that's what I mean. If there are ways that you can be flexible to get the job you want, do it. But if it's conflicting with something that you do all the time, and it's necessary and it's required, it's just not the job for you, but you'll keep applying. Next, consider what work you can do now to help you reach your goal on the career map. Remember, every job you get should be giving you some kind of transferable skills that'll help give you experience to get another job that'll help you get your dream job in the future. Finally, seasonal jobs, summer and holidays, sometimes can turn into permanent positions. And that's great. And that happened for my sister. She worked for City of Miami Beach Parks and Recreation as a camp counselor when she was in high school. And she started working there as her full-time job when she graduated and while she was in college. And it worked out for her. And she continued to do something she loved and she was happy with. And I know that that happens with quite a few other people. Two, are moving down the list. Now, these are good tips for applying for a job. So always read the job description thoroughly to make sure you have the right skills and interests. Remember, if it's not a match for you, you're probably wasting your time and you're wasting the employer's time. Next, complete all parts of the application. It shows that you can follow directions. Next, if you're applying for a job in person, ask if you can take the application home and return it the next day. This will give you more time to complete it correctly. This is really helpful if you have to look up dates and times and addresses and phone numbers and names of people you work for. Very often this is going to be information you need on your job application. And also, you're probably going to be completing these applications online going forward. But it is better, and you will complete it neater if you're working at home. And the only time that rule doesn't apply is if the employer says, we really need to hire someone soon. I need to look at your application today because I'm making the decision tomorrow. So unless they tell you that, take that application home and give it the proper attention it deserves. Next, ask family and friends to proofread. Spelling and grammatical errors are unacceptable. You guys have these amazing devices called cell phones. You can look up the proper spelling for anything. Use that. Make sure your application is flawless, perfect. This is one of the fastest ways for someone to pull your application aside and put it in the do not contact pile where you're not even going to be considered for a position. Next, be honest. List your experiences without exaggerating. If you don't have an experience or you don't have the skill set they need, you can't lie about it. You can't exaggerate about it. You can only write about the skills and experiences you do have. And if it's not a match for you, it's not the right job for you. Next, be patient. You might not hear back from a potential employer for a week or more. Sometimes they get busy, and sometimes the need isn't great right at that moment, but the need arises, in a week or two, and then you're contacted. So don't stress if you don't hear immediately. Next, let's talk about providing references. So again, you want to build your reputation, build your brand. That way, when you need a reference or letter of recommendation, you can ask a coach, a teacher, a counselor, a group leader, or principal. Never friends or family. I'm sure your parents have told you this, and I'm sure your teachers have told you this, but this is one of the best reasons to join an extracurricular club or a sport. It allows you an additional opportunity to build a positive relationship with the teacher or coach. And when you build that positive relationship, they see the excellent skills that you have. They see the amazing things that you have to offer, and it helps them write a much better letter of recommendation for you. So you're getting out there, you're branching out, you're meeting new people with more opportunities to get letters of recommendation and references for job applications. You can also ask people for whom you've done informal jobs or volunteer work, such as babysitting or dog walking, because if you've done it and you were committed and you were reliable, they can speak on your behalf. And definitely prepare a list of your top 3 references, including names, titles, and contact information. It is a really nice part to already include in your resume and very often will be required in your job application. So if you know that you're going to be applying for a job soon, start getting those references together. 16, once you have those references, make sure you have permission to use them and confirm that you're giving out the right contact information. I've had students before use me as a reference and they were not using the correct email address and I wasn't able to get in touch with their potential employer. So make sure you're using the right contact info. Next, when you're talking to your references, tell your references what qualities the employers are seeking that they've seen you exhibit. So you're not telling the references what to say, but you are telling the references a little bit more about the job and what the employer is looking for and what the employer will likely ask about. And finally, interviewing. Research the company before you interview. It shows that you're interested and you're serious about the job. They might very well ask you questions. And if they don't ask you questions, one of the last questions they are going to likely ask is there anything else you want to say or ask? And that would be a great opportunity to show that you've researched the company and you know about their company, and you would state what you like about their company. 19, prepare questions to ask about the job, work environment, and company, just in case. So when you have that opportunity and they ask you, is there anything else you want to know? You've got questions to ask. Next, dress nicely. You don't need to wear a suit, but you should be neat, clean, and professional. Remember, you should always dress at least one level above what you'd be wearing typically for that job. 21, arrive 10 to 15 minutes early to give yourself time to check in and calm your nerves. And I'm going to go with 15 minutes early. 22, answer questions directly and avoid slang. Try not to use and like in your responses. So you want to be direct and you want to be concrete with your answers. 23, be positive, enthusiastic. Show that you're interested in the job and the company. It's okay to smile. So when you're enthusiastic and you've got a big smile on your face, letting them know that you want to be there, that you're not forced into this, or this is not something you have to do. You want to be there. 24, body language is important. Sit up straight, maintain good eye contact, and smile. They might get so much from the nonverbal, so it's things you're not even saying. It's just from your body language. And employers have known to not accept someone, not based on their answers, but based on the body language, their facial expressions, the way they sat, the fact that the person maybe didn't make eye contact. These things are all really important, and they're just as important as the answers you give during the interview. And lastly, within 24 hours of your interview, send a thank you email and restate your interest in the job. It's professional and it's a nice way of really letting the employer know you're interested, and it's reminding the employer who you are and the great interview you had. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing here, and we are going to get back to the presentation. Over here. Okay. Now that we've debunked some of the biggest myths about job hunting, we're going to learn more about how to do it right. So it's important to have the right information when seeking a job, and that's what this session covers. So, learning about the available jobs. How do you think job hunters find out about available jobs? How do we know what's available? It might be online job boards. That's becoming more and more popular. It might be the classified ads. I still use the newspaper from time to time, but the classified ads are available online, and there are a lot of businesses that will post in the online classified ads and in print that don't use various job boards. So it's good to do both. Obviously, signs in store windows. And then remember, we were talking about networking, so word of mouth. Asking employers, just going in to the business that you like and asking if they're hiring. And you can apply and submit a resume and see if they're hiring that way. So you're contacting that way. Regardless of how people learn about available jobs, you almost always have to submit some form of resume as a part of the job hunting process. So I will tell you, when you get to high school, that resume is so important. Yes, you need it for jobs, but you're going to need it for internships, community service. You might even need it for the community service graduation requirement. You're going to probably even need it for a class, because a lot of our classes assign a resume. I know I do. So the resume is very, very important. If you're going to be hiring for a job on Lincoln Road, like I said, most of these places do not have job applications. I said they're paperless. They're paperless. It's either an online application most of the time, or they will ask you for your physical resume or electronic resume. So my next question for you is, what is a resume? So we're going to go over to that first page that we have on your student guide, and it says On the Hunt. And there are two vocabulary terms, and the first one's resume. So think about it. What is a resume? How would you define a resume? Let's see here. It's a written summary of a person's education and work experience. And that's fair for an employer to want to know and review before hiring someone. So what's in a resume? A job hunter creates a resume to show employers that the job hunter has the right skills for the job. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to watch a short video. And all right, we are going to share screen again, because I do want you to see this video here. And we're going to go here, share computer sound, and let's see this video.
created using Powtoon.
Okay. All right, so at this point, you're going to want to look at your On the Hunt worksheet. And we want to go ahead and complete the activity for Resume Builder. So the questionnaire is, note the 5 tips for resume writing that we saw in the video. And those were the things they were writing down on the chalkboard. So at this point, please share with me and I can go ahead and I can list what I have. So number 1 that you would want to write down that they covered was keep the design simple and professional, including bullets for separate sections. This is something a lot of students need to be told. A lot of times they create their first resume. They'll write really long descriptive paragraphs. And if you think about it, employers are going through dozens of resumes sometimes. For certain jobs, it's actually hundreds of resumes. So it's really hard to read through paragraphs. But when we're looking at bulleted list, we can get the important information much faster. So that is a definite need. 2, use professional language, even in your email address. So if your teachers and your parents haven't told you this yet, you need to have a professional email address. So, you know, many of us have our own personal email address that we use and we communicate with our parents and our family. But if you have an email address that says cutie pie or I love poodles, which I'm a poodle lover, those are fun email addresses, but they're not professional. A professional email address usually includes your name. Number 3, tailor your resume for the specific job. So, you know, if you're my sister, for instance, was applying to Lincoln Road, and Lincoln Road has restaurants and it has retail shops. And she had a little bit experience in both. So she created 2 different resumes. She created a resume that she gave to the restaurants because she wanted to apply for a hostess position. And then she created a resume for the retail establishments because she wanted to apply for a position in sales. And they were, you know, they had similar experience, but they were worded differently because they highlighted different skills. And if you're, you know, applying to a restaurant position and you want to be a hostess and all you're talking about is, you know, collecting money and selling products, yes, they are transferable skills, but you would do a little bit better if you talked about your resume, your restaurant experience. So remember, those employers are going to be looking at dozens of different resumes. Make sure you're doing something where yours stands out and yours has the right skill set. 4, explain your qualifications clearly. That's where the bulleted list comes in. It's kind of short and you can be very clear in your descriptions of what you've done. And when employers see that, they're able to easily match your skill set. And then 5, be clear and concise, which is similar to what we said before. You're being short, it's clear, it's deliberate, and again, with the goal of matching skill set. Okay, so the next thing that we would want to do here is look at this sheet. This is the My Resume sheet. And so what I'd like to do, just very quickly, is share the screen. And, oh, it's not there, so we're not going to share just yet. Okay. That would not be it. So we're going to stop there. I apologize, but let's go ahead and, okay, this should help. Okay, so this is the My Resume worksheet, and let me share the screen so you may see it a little bit better. There it is. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is just talk about this My Resume worksheet. Okay, so before I was a high school teacher, I was a middle school teacher, and I can't tell you how important this is. So I know I told you that little list of the 25 job application tips are really important. This is so important. And it's not just important for you right now as a middle school student. This is important for you as a high school student, as a college student. It's important for you if you already have a job, okay? let's talk about why this is important. All right, so this is just kind of like a skeletal resume worksheet, okay? And basically here you're putting in your information. There's little tips to make sure you're putting the right information in. If people are going to call you, make sure you have an appropriate voicemail message. I have heard of people eliminating a candidate because they had an inappropriate voicemail message. So if you know you're applying for a job and you have your things funny on your voicemail, time to change that. It's also time to maybe create a new email address if you don't have a professional email address. Okay, so that should be the easiest part of your resume. So here for work and volunteer experience, you're going to list the paid jobs you've had, unpaid work. You can include internship, community service. You also are going to want to include the dates that you've had these jobs. And you typically have, most people will create something called a chronological resume where they have the most recent jobs on top. And then as you're working your way down your experience, you have the older experience on the bottom. Now, where it says here to start each experience with an active verb. So you want to say planned and organized various activities for young children. Okay, if you're applying for a camp counselor position. Let's see, taught early childhood age children developmentally appropriate activities. Again, great if you're going to be a camp counselor working with young children. So those are the active verbs, and you're using the bullet points to punctuate. And this is the easiest way for employers to match the skills you have with the skills they need. They can see it clearly, it'll stick out, and they'll say, oh, this is the person we want. Okay. Next, you want to talk about your extracurricular activities and achievements. I know I brought those up earlier because I said that those were great ways to make connections, network, and know teachers a little bit better and coaches so that you can have references. That is true, but it also gives you extra things to put on your resume, and it gives you extra opportunities to earn achievements and awards and recognition and certificates that can also be put on your resume. So lots of benefits to that. So if you're not in an extracurricular activity yet, let's get started on that. The school year is going to start up again. Make this a priority. Okay, your education and academic achievements. So here's, this is an interesting thing. So it says list your highest grade completed. So if you're still in high school and you're in 10th grade, you know, sophomore at Miami Beach Senior High. Okay, then it says GPA if above a 3.0. So that means if you don't really have a high GPA, it's actually recommended to just not put it on the resume. You only want to brag about your GPA if it's high. If you're going to put your weighted GPA with your honors classes, you are supposed to note that it's a weighted GPA. If you're applying for a certain job and you think the courses you're taking or the academy that you're in, maybe you're in the Academy of Hospitality and Tourism and you're applying for a hotel position, if you think that's going to help, put that information down and it likely will benefit. All right, personal qualities, any kind of relevant traits that you have, any kind of skills. If you're proficient in Microsoft or Adobe or Web Illustrator, or you speak multiple languages, excellent, put those skills down. And then here's where you can put your references. You may use the option of saying available upon request. You gotta have them ready. It's actually preferred that you include them. I'm gonna actually take this opportunity to thank those of you that have been following it at home. I said that this was the most important sheet, not just if you were in middle school, but this is also important in high school, even if you have a job. The reason this is important is because whenever we have a job, we want to update our resume. So you can use a sheet like this, or you can have a digital or electronic resume and constantly update that. The reason is sometimes life happens and surprises happen, and it can happen after we've had a job for 10 years or 20 years. We might want to change ourselves, or there might be a need for a change because business is closed down. And if you're constantly updating your resume, it's so much easier to look through it and make sure the information is accurate. If you haven't updated your resume in 20 years, say that happens in the future, it's really hard to start finding the right contact information and matching dates of when you had certain employers and the skills that you utilized for certain jobs. Okay, That's why this is important. Always keep updated records of your skills, where you've worked, your experiences, when you've been there, contact information, including address, name of manager, phone number, and email address. All right, at this time, I want to thank all of you for participating. This is one of my favorite sessions, the On the Hunt, but I also want to say that we're not done, and I'd like to continue this session next week because we will be moving along with writing a resume, and we have some fun activities. So thank you, and looking forward to seeing you next week. Regine?